Hello and welcome to the wonderful world of wine. We are your hosts Mark Lindsay and Kim Simone, exploring all things wine with you. You can find us on Facebook at The Wonderful World of Wine. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the wonderful world of wine. Kim and I are here to talk all things wine with you. Kim, how are you today?
I'm well, Mark. How are you doing?
Everything is great. Always happy to talk wine today.
Absolutely. It's my favorite thing to do, besides drink the wine.
There you go. We did that last show.
We did, celebrating our 100th episode, and we're psyched to get on to the next 100 episodes, and that we're glad that you're along for the ride with us.
So we start each show with what we Googled ourselves this week before we have the topics that we discuss together. So, Kim, what did you research on Google this week?
So I did some research on a particular area of California that isn't as well known as Napa and Sonoma, but that has a lot of very interesting wines coming out of it and that a lot of people are enjoying, and we're trying to get a little bit more information out there to consumers. So it's an area called the Central Coast. It is ginormous. It goes all the way from just south of San Francisco down to Santa Monica, and it has both coastal vineyards and then also vineyards more inland, and the names themselves are actually a little bit more familiar, I think, to people than just the overall category of the Central Coast. So these are places like Paso Robles, places like Monterey, places like Arroyo. So there's a lot of wine, a lot of different grapes, a lot of different styles. I am particularly fond of the reds from Paso Robles. They're really ripe and lots of fruit. There's excellent Zinfandel, really great Cabernet, and these are wines that I get particularly excited about, and I love just having a little bit more information that I can share with my consumers.
Great info. A lot of good Pinot Noir from the Central Coast.
There is excellent Pinot Noir from the Central Coast, from more of those like coastal regions. They get a lot of cool air coming in from the Pacific Ocean, and Pinot Noir loves that. And what about yourself, Mark? What did you Google this week?
Well, this week I saw a stat, Kim, about the top export markets for the U.S. wines. So where are we sending wine to? And I was kind of surprised at some of the top ones. Who would you think is the number one that we're sending wine to? Because I think you probably thought what I did, but we'll see.
Were we thinking China?
I was thinking China, yeah.
You were thinking
Hong Kong, China. But
I think I had seen a stat that Italy is a place where a lot of our wines go. Am I wrong?
Too. That was not in the top 5. Okay. So the top export markets for the U.S. wines, number 1 is Canada.
Oh, that actually makes a whole lot of sense. I guess I should have thought of that.
Canada, then the U.K., and then Hong Kong, Japan, France, and China.
Really? That's very interesting.
And I thought Italy would be up there too. I guess Italy's sending more to us than we're sending to them. But yeah, interesting.
Very.
And just another graph to put out there for our listeners. Geeky stuff.
Absolutely.
So for our first topic today, Kim and I thought we would talk about wine tariffs. There's been so much in the news lately. Actually, more newsprint than news stations, I thought, lately. You can find these tariff articles every day and what it's about, and I'd like to kind of talk back and forth here with Kim and find out what is your interpretation of what's going on, Kim, and how it affects your business and my interpretation, and see if we can together figure this out and give our listeners some information of what it is.
So what it is special taxes that are going to be put on wines that are coming into the United States from certain countries. And the big one that is getting hit is France. Italy is not. I do believe Spain is as well. And there are certain other products from other countries that are also getting hit. So the biggie that people are talking about are whiskeys from Scotland, so Scotch. And what happens is that as soon as these products cross the border, whoever is the one doing the actual purchasing then has to cover the cost of this extra tax. So in the most cases when it comes to alcohol, it's the importer / distributor. So once they have to, say they're getting in a wine from France that they ordinarily pay $100 a case for, they are now going to have to be paying $200 a case for that wine, and then they will wrap the cost into what they then charge to whoever their customers are. So whether it's being passed down the line, if it's an importer, then it's being passed down the line to a distributor. distributor who is then selling to the restaurants and the retailers. And that cost is going to be passed along until ultimately you, the consumer, will also be having to pay some of that as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of information. And my initial understanding on a tariff was a typical 750 milliliter wine, the tariff was like 10 cents to 30 cents of cost because of a tariff charge. So something happened. We don't like talking politics on the show, but something had happened where the U.S. didn't like something that was going on with France and it's dealing with Airbus. In October, they said, well, we don't like what's going on, so we're going to put in a 25% tariff increase on French products, not including sparkling, which was strange at the time. It was up to like 14% alcohol and Scotch. So it was like 4 countries, France, Germany, Spain, and Scotch. But then something else, I don't know if you follow politics. I'm sure a lot of our listeners know more than I do about it. But something else happened where EU nations then were supporting Airbus or some other big corporations in the United States, and we didn't like it. So they said, now we're going to impose 100% tariffs and add all the EU. So this is huge. The industry's going crazy. So imagine, you're buying a $10 bottle of wine, imported wine. If you can still get it imported, it's going to cost you double, basically. $20. So how would this impact like the restaurant industry, Kim? Are they looking at, are you dealing with vendors now that are saying, oh, we're looking at what we have to do? Or
Sure. Yeah, so we have to look at, you just brought up the question of availability. So it's not just about price. It's about, hey, if an importer decides that, well, this doesn't make financial sense for us to bring these wines in anymore, then there will be fewer products that we can even get our hands on here. Because if it doesn't make sense financially for someone to carry a certain wine from a certain country, then they just won't do it. They'll shift what they're carrying to someplace else that makes more reasonable sense. So I've been thinking of those smaller wine producers in these European countries who they've probably got pretty good relationships with their, along the chain where who they're selling to, who is then selling it overseas to us, that they're probably going to be pretty hard hit by this because maybe the importers aren't going to want to do business with those smaller growers who are like, yeah, we can't really do anything about our price. This is what we have to sell it to you for in order for us to make a living. So I think that we're going to see a significant reduction in the different types of wines that we're getting from the EU, not only for different regions, but also, these smaller producers that I think tend to produce better quality wines.
Yeah, so you have to think, like you were saying, as far as the wineries, the EU wineries themselves who are selling to the importers, they can't eat 100% tariff costs. Where the first 25% went in effect, I heard some suppliers, the importers were asking the winery, we still want your product. And they say, okay, well, we'll take care of that 25%. But they're not going to take care of 100%.
No, 100 is ridiculous.
They can't do that. So it's really, the industry really hard. I mean, I've seen some small importers, they're saying they'll have to close.
Yeah, that they might go out of business.
Yeah, the whole portfolio is imported wine. So what's going to happen is these EU wineries will then now sell to China. They'll go somewhere else, just who are begging to get more product. So a lot of people are nervous. There's been a lot of petitions out there to sign. I think there was a informal hearing which had a lot of good articles about what was happening there. And a lot of the representatives were saying to people, well, this is a good thing for American wine, right? Because people will drink more American wine. But think about this. A lot of the big American companies also have holdings in European vineyards.
And not only that, but there are certain special wines that we get from Europe that can't be replicated in other places. I mean, our wines from California are great. Our wines from Oregon are great. Our wines from New York are great, but they're not Bordeaux. They're not Loire Sancerre. They're not Muscadet. They're not Burgundy. They're different. They're all excellent, but they're different. And suddenly not being able to get our hands on those wines or not having the availability to be able to experience those wines, I think will be detrimental to consumers. And yes, will people start maybe drinking more American wines? Sure, but it's just not the same.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. If you want to pay double, if you can find them,
if you can,
they're not even going to send them into the country,
right?
Which eliminate a huge. You're talking retailers that specialize, importers that specialize, they cannot stay in business. And these meetings were sad because they had all these people basically begging the government, look at this. This impact is huge.
Right. And I think a lot of people were initially thinking, oh, well, it's just going to make the wines more expensive, and didn't make that next step of, well, if the wines are too expensive, then you have this other problem going on, which is if they're too expensive at the very beginning, then they won't be brought in at all.
So they had there was a lot of graphics out there about like what the impact would be. And the one I saw that had the most feedback on social media was one that just showed stats about job loss, and they showed that the EU would sell to China upwards of $10 billion worth of increased business to China. U.S. jobs to be lost would be like 70 to 80,000 jobs lost.
And did they specify where those job losses would be? Would it be mostly on the importer distributor side?
They did. They gave a stat saying there's about 65,000 importers and distributors in the United States who employ like 200,000 people.
Right. So it's not just the people who own these companies. It's
all
salespeople. It's people who work in their accounting department. It's their truck drivers. It's the entire gamut of different jobs to do in a big company.
And that was the retail side, Kim, too. So they didn't look at how do you know now restaurant impact? Mm-hmm. Like if you on your wine list, what do you have? Probably 50% imported, 50% domestic. You might lose 50% of your list, right? So, and what if you have an Italian restaurant and all your menu is Italian wines? Right. You can't double your product. You can't do that. So it's interesting. I've talked to a lot of distributors when the first 25% come in, they say, well, we're just getting stuff shipped now. We're going to see, not pay that 25. We're going to get increased now. So
I think that was a big thing that happened for some of the distributors I was talking to too.
And after they put up the 100% thing idea, now they're saying, whoa, don't hold, don't ship anything yet. We don't do anything. And the wineries don't want to do anything because they don't know what's happening. So there's going to be, you're going to start seeing a little bit of low inventory coming up. We know that Scotch already went up with the 25%.
And there were certain liqueurs that were going up too, I believe.
Yeah, now it's going to impact all. And not only you being the foodie, Kim, it's going to impact cheese, food, all imported foods. So this is huge. Yeah. And I'm surprised it's not getting national attention on news stations or world news type of things. It's just mostly articles in the wine industry. And people who went to the federal meeting in Washington said the room held like 200 people, and they were shocked that not even like no restaurants or sommeliers from Washington were there. No one in the industry local packed the place. Huh. So they feel the representatives didn't feel it's an issue because they only had like 50 people instead of 200.
I'm surprised that's all that it was.
Yeah, it's sad that no one showed up. So, this week I had put out a little thing about a petition to send out and let your representatives know you don't want this to go through. So it's all political, unfortunately. So who knows? Who knows? Have you heard a lot of scuttlebutt from
We've been talking about it for 6 months. Every time we have meetings with our distributors or we have dinner with our distributors or my trip to France, it was things that were top of mind and have been for quite a while. So all the levels of our industry have been talking about this for quite a bit of time and trying to make a plan and figure out what's gonna go on. I think we're kind of lucky in the restaurant that we're at that we can adjust. Sure, there are going to be some hard hit things like Muscadet, for example, fantastic shellfish wine, great with oysters, and something that is very, very popular on our list. We don't know what's going to happen with Muscadet, what's going to happen with Sancerre, what's going to happen with Red Burgundy.
Yeah, that's a good example because if you go and order a Muscadet at your restaurant, it's probably $30, $25, $30 a bottle, maybe, right?
It's not usually a pretty expensive bottle, but yeah.
A customer's not going to pay $60 for a Muscadet.
As good as it is with oysters.
In retail, it's a $15. So, that's huge. It won't be 50. It'll be half, but I've talked to other retailers who, their selection is based on finding these niche imported items. We know people personally have their own small importing businesses that they just can't do it. You can't do it anymore. The selection is going to dwindle down, which is going to favor the big U.S. corporations. You're going to see more of that if this goes through.
Or those big brands and less of these smaller family producers.
Someone's going to take over, but we'll have to see. So tariffs are hot, Kim.
Well, as the as the historians that we like to be and look back and think about wine through history and how things change or sometimes how things stay the same. This is a new thing for us, but it's not necessarily a new thing for the wine industry. There's always been the interaction between wine and politics, and when there have been wars between great nations like between France and England, there were changes that had to be made because England could no longer get French wines, and they were going back hundreds of years here. But that was the whole reason why port was invented, was because the English still needed their wine and they needed to go get it from someplace else. So they went to Spain and Portugal, and whole new styles of wines were created and new areas were opened up. So I don't know if this situation will lead to something like that, but change is a constant. So we shall see what happens.
It's funny you said that, Kim, about the history, because the whole basis of why booze was taxed so heavily, to fund the revolution.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting how there's always been a tax on the labels are gone. Remember years ago we had the seals on the tax sales on
walls? No, I don't remember that.
Oh, you're so much younger than me.
Before my drinking time.
People, our listeners know, there was a little tax seal that said the tax was paid on this bottle. But there was a chart I had years ago. It showed like up to 40% of state, federal taxes built into the price. We don't have sales tax any longer at the counter, but there's always tax.
Right. It's hidden in there.
Yeah, it's always in there. And
Yep.
it's a shame. And now this is just another tax.
Yeah, whether it's an excise tax or whether it's a tariff, there are all of these things. Just like gasoline, just like buying gas at the pump, there are all these taxes that are figured into it, and alcohol is no different.
And your cable bill.
All your phone bills. You're listening to The Wonderful World of Wine. We are your hosts, Mark and Kim. You can find out more information about Mark at franklinliquors.com and more about myself at vinitaswineworks.com. So a little bit of local news that is wine-related that we wanted to discuss on the show today. And this is regarding a small business that has just opened up in the neighboring town of Millis. And they are a coffee shop / cocktail wine bar, kind of dual concept. And the section of town that they've opened up in is called Millis Clicquot. And for those of you who are familiar with wine and familiar with champagne, know that there's a famous champagne house called Veuve Clicquot. And they are very, very protective of their name and their trademark. So when this coffee shop opened up a couple of weeks ago, and they wanted to call it Clicquot because of the name of the town, part of Millis that they were in, the folks at Veuve Clicquot came down very, very hard on them and made them change all sorts of stuff about the business.
Yeah, this was sad, Kim. Being business owner, small business. First, I was amazed that when you were listening to the news and you hear Clicquot and, you're the bubbly queen. So when you get to it, you can tell our listeners a little bit about Clicquot. But this poor local business. Now, I don't know if a lot of people are familiar with Millis, but have you noticed, Kim, when you're on 109 in Millis, there's where the Ann and Hope is, there's a little factory in the back there and has a little stack and it says Clicquot. So if you're actually on your GPS thing, it says Clicquot Millis. In that region there.
The weather apps do the same thing. So my weather app station is Millis Clicquot because I'm on that side of Norfolk.
That Clicquot tower there is actually, I thought it was painted on. It's actually in brick. So historically, that's a very historic thing in the town.
Was it a mill?
It was a soda.
Soda?
Clicquot soda.
Oh, soda.
Yeah. So before this gentleman, there was actually a restaurant for years called the Clicquot Cafe, I believe. So this gentleman comes up. He wants to open a business. He wants to play on the Clicquot thing. He names his, Millis Clicquot Cafe, I think, at the time. And somehow these people, now Clicquot is a huge corporation.
Multinational, multi-billion-dollar business.
It's LVMH. So it's Moet, Hennessy, and who's the fashion guy? Louis Vuitton.
Yes.
So it's a huge, and somehow they found this guy, probably because of social media. He puts something out. Google somehow says there's a Clicquot now in Millis, and he gets a cease and desist order?
Cease and desist, yeah, with the name.
You have to now make the name, the name is wrong. Your colors, you're using yellow because Clicquot is yellow. And he had just spent like $5,000 on his sign, his branding. He had to change his business LLC, his signage, basically do all his social media.
His website, his
everything.
Email, all of his stuff he had to change.
It's just amazing what they can do. And I think he was saying nice in the news story that they are working with him. So I'm sure he said it's going to cost me a lot of money. And now I think it's called Millis Clicquot Coffee.
Millis Clicquot Coffee.
So
it's right on 109 in Millis.
And I have to tell you, Kim, when we bought the store in the 70s, we found all these old wooden soda crate that had Millis Clicquot soda on them. And I noticed in the news story he had decorations of the old Clicquot stuff. So I think we'll have to stop in there, get a drink, and give him a couple.
I think we should
support.
definitely do that. Let's go in and lend some local small business support to our neighbors over there in Millis. But it's such a shame. It's one thing to be protecting your brand and being aware of protecting your intellectual property and all that stuff. But I mean, come on, this is a little guy,
crazy.
And there's precedent for the name in the area. That's what sort of is befuddling me. It's not like he just came out and said, I'm just going to call it Clicquot, and specifically trying to steal from the Champagne House. This was a name that has been associated with this area for 100 years or more. So I think that this is a little ridiculous.
Let's talk a little about
people.
Clicquot for our listeners, Kim. We're talking 1700s, this Champagne House.
Right.
So who was the famous, wasn't this the house where the famous woman invented?
Yes. So her husband's name was Clicquot. So she was Veuve Clicquot, so the widow Clicquot, but Ponsardin was the other name that was affiliated with the family. And after her husband passed away, she took over the winery in the Champagne House and introduced a number.
Which was very unusual, right? For way
actually,
back then,
not
right?
for Champagne,
No?
believe it or not. There is a very robust history of female members of these Champagne houses being the ones to really take the lead and be responsible for their houses and their product. Laurent Perrier is the exact same way. That's been female owned for like 200 years.
Wow.
But anyway, I digress. But anyway, so Veuve Clicquot was one of the real movers and shakers at the beginning of Champagne's creation, along with a couple of other people like Dom Perignon. So she spearheaded a lot of new innovations that have made Champagne what they are today. And so now this brand is, as you can see, an international powerhouse with a lot of power and a lot of dollars behind them. I'm sure for them a $5,000 sign is nothing, but for our neighbor in Millis, that's a big chunk of change. So the folks in Champagne have always been very, very brand conscious and wanting to protect the Champagne brand. So the name Champagne, the word Champagne, can't even be used really on anything. So you can't call your sparkling wine made in the same way as Champagne. Not only can you not call it Champagne, but you can't even call it Champagne method. You have to call it traditional method or something else. You can't name a paint color Champagne. You can't have nail polish called Champagne. Any of these things. They're very, very protective of the name and the reputation of, you can kind of think of the word Champagne as a brand in and of itself. And this seems to be that the folks at Veuve Clicquot are kind of taking it another step further, and that their brand name, they're taking sort of the same mentality.
So you're the bubbly queen. And I'm sure you've had a ton of Clicquot in the past, and it's generally $40 up retail bottle,
Yep.
right? Would you change your opinion on a corporation as a consumer to buy this product now, knowing this type of story?
I
Or
mean,
do you
it's
respect that
never
they're
really
protected?
been my go-to. So personally, I can't say whether or not this will change my buying habits. But I don't know. I kind of feel like big companies should have a little bit of the human element in there as well, and to take different situations into account. And maybe I don't know how they interacted with this gentleman in Millis, and maybe it was all done in a in a way that was understanding. But I don't know. I don't know if that was the case. So
Yeah, so
I don't know.
I was just curious if you think it's good that they're protected. I know you like the protection
Yeah,
of
no,
Champagne. They're
I do.
protecting this history. We don't know.
But at this
we don't
point-
know the true story.
Right, and for
but-
this, they're not protecting the reputation of the region of Champagne. They're protecting their brand. They don't want anybody using their brand, and I can understand that. But when it's a name that is in other places referring to completely other things, I don't necessarily feel like they're the only ones with a claim to use the name.
I just think it's something in back of my mind now.
Are you going to buy a little bit less Veuve Clicquot?
Yeah, I mean, it's just something to let people know. Another reason maybe to go to a smaller grower of Champagne, than as long as we're not hit with that 100% tariff. So,
Right.
But interesting story. We thought we'd tell the listeners about it, and anything Champagne sparkling related, we gets Kim all happy.
That's right. It really does. But that's another shout out for going to support your local business. So whether it's your local coffee shop, whether it's your local retailer, whether it's your local bakery, go out and buy local and support your neighbors who have businesses in your towns.
Thank you for listening today on The Wonderful World of Wine. We've been your hosts, Mark Lindsay and Kim Simone, exploring all things wine with you. You can find us on Facebook at The Wonderful World of Wine. We would love any questions or comments you'd have. And you can find our past episodes on SoundCloud or iTunes. Cheers.